When we talk about classical music, we are really talking about 18th century music. A lot of people say, I was listening to classical music the other day, but that's a pretty inexact way to refer to concert music or art music. When we're talking about classical music, we're really talking about the 18th century and the composers who wrote during that time. And when we think of a city that was the hub of creativity in music and the performing arts, we think of Vienna, Austria. Not that the music wasn't written anywhere else, it's just that the three most revered masters of classical music lived in that city. Not only was Vienna the home to the great classic masters, but it was also the hub of not only the major arts patrons, but also a growing concert-going public. Patronage enabled the composers to write their music, but public concerts brought them a wider audience. The last half of the 18th century saw an incredible explosion of creativity and perfection of the classic style, and no composers are more rightfully revered for achieving that perfection than Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. Haydn, the eldest of the three, spent most of his career working in the court of the Hungarian prince Nicholas Esterhazy. Of the three, you might say that he had the steadiest job. He had a large musical establishment at his disposal, a comfortable living, and free rein to compose in whatever way he pleased. In return, he was expected to make sure that performances at the prince's palace would be first-rate, and the envy of all who came as invited guests. Haydn is remembered for his compositions in the area of symphony, chamber music, concerto, solo, duo, all kinds. He wrote operas, but those aren't often remembered. Mozart, second eldest of the three, worked for many years under the employ of the Prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo, seen here on the right. Mozart's father was also employed as a musician by the Archbishop. Since the Archbishop's court was located in Mozart's home city, Salzburg, young Wolfgang Amadeus was expected to be at the court and in service. However, the young composer had other ideas, seeking his fortune in the much more cosmopolitan world of Vienna, where he pursued commissions to write operas and lots of instrumental works. His frequent absences from the court finally got him fired, the Archbishop scoffing that he wanted nothing more to do with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart is remembered most often for his operas and his concertos, his symphonies, his chamber music. He wrote in all of the different genres of classic music and brought them to high perfection. Beethoven may perhaps be considered the first famous freelance musician. Not that he did not have royal patrons, he did, but he was not beholden to any particular one of them and pursued his own independent way, writing the music he wanted to write, investing his money wisely, and achieving widespread admiration and monetary reward from ticket sales to his public concerts. Beethoven is often seen as both a classic and a romantic composer because of this independence and his stated belief in his own genius. But he too had a great patron, no less than the brother of the emperor, seen here on the right, the Archduke Rudolf. The Archduke guaranteed Beethoven a yearly salary simply because he understood the magnitude of his genius. And he was also an excellent amateur musician himself. In fact, Beethoven took him as his only composition pupil. By the way, you can always distinguish Beethoven from Haydn and Mozart simply because he didn't wear a wig. So Beethoven was the great master of symphonic music, the great master of concertos, the great master of chamber music. He also wrote some vocal music too, but he's the one that brought instrumental music to a new level of primacy. As you may recall from our last video on the Baroque, the big word was counterpoint. Now our big word is going to be sonata. Sonata is a word that is both a noun and a verb. As a verb, it refers to a style with a certain set of expectations and necessary techniques centered on the listener. To put it most basically, the listener hears a set of themes or melodies in the first part, hears those themes disappear or get altered or fragmented in the second part, and then finally hears those themes return in the third part. These parts are called exposition, development, recapitulation. Now I have drastically simplified here because you realize that the composer must employ the utmost craft in the areas of structure, melody, rhythm, harmony, and use of the instrument itself to make a piece of music that makes people want to listen to it over and over again. So as you can see from this slide, you've got all the three sections. You've got the things that are going on with them. There can be more than one theme. There can be more than two themes. In fact, there can be up to 5 themes. This is just a simple idea of what sonata is all about. And as you can see down here from the graphic, that it starts out at the beginning, there's a little bit of instability, but then there's a lot of instability in the middle, and then there's finally ultimate stability at the end. As a noun, sonata refers to a multi-movement instrumental work, usually for one or more instruments. Here's the first movement out of 3 for Beethoven's famous solo keyboard sonata, the so-called Moonlight Sonata. As you can see, this is in Beethoven's own hand. He would have sent this to his copyist, who would have then sent it to the publisher. So this is Beethoven's writing itself. So all of these groups that you're going to see in the next slide play pieces that use sonata style, except they have different names. There's solo sonatas, there's trios, there are duo sonatas, there's string quartets, there's string quintets, there's wind quintets, and there's symphonies. All of these groups use sonata style, especially in the first movement of a multi-movement work. It's just that you have different titles from sonata. You've got string quartet in G major, or wind quintet in F minor, or symphony in C minor. All of these things are sonata form, sonata style, sonata technique, especially in the first movement. So they're multi-movement works, 4 movements, 3 movements, with the first movement being heavy on sonata. So there's your introduction to music of the 18th century, the classic style, and sonata.